Hey, folks. Before starting this podcast, it's with real sadness that I have to tell you that Steve, who's in this podcast with Carl, has graduated to glory. So we actually recorded this last year, and at that stage, Steve was given just a couple of months to live, and he actually lived a full extra year, and he ran hard, and he gigged, and he preached, and he laughed, and he led plenty of people to the Lord, and even produced a book called The Last Laugh that sold thousands of copies. And so he went out guns a-blazing, and he's a great role model to us. So yeah, Steve Legg, we salute you. And Carl, of course. Carl's still got his ongoing battle, as you'll hear. So this is a very moving podcast. All the more, they're both funny, they're both comedians, so there's laughter and maybe tears in the mix as you listen to this, as they discuss life and death and sickness and how to handle that. So please stay on at the end, because I want to say something else that you might want to be involved in. But right now, let's get to the podcast.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. Inspired, if you're new to us, it's all about getting mates of mine from different walks of life to come in and share their stories. And often, well, usually, because if you've been on a journey of faith any length of time, you've had a few sucker punches in the mix. So it's not triumphalistic faith, but it's the nitty gritty of what faith looks like, sometimes when you're down the dust, and also with some incredibly powerful stories of God breaking in. And what's interesting this week is that I've never done this, but we're having two people on from two different locations, and they've both been on before, and you'll find out the reason shortly why we're doing this. But so straight away I want to welcome Carl Beech and Steve Legg. Welcome, boys.
Thank you.
Hello, mate.
So it's great to have you. You know, we're relentlessly bombarded with bad news, and again, Inspired is about counteracting that with good news that stirs faith. And I think this week it's going to stir faith in a very different way, because essentially I've asked you two mates in to talk about heavy stuff, because you've both, since our last podcast, which was, I don't know, I'm guessing 18 months ago, give or take a few months for both of you, which were brilliant podcasts of your ministry in different spheres and how God used you. Since then, you've both had a pretty shocking physical diagnosis. So, Carl, let's just start with you. What's happened to you?
Well, in a nutshell, I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease and found out simultaneously that I'd become an insulin-dependent diabetic, which is a heady combination. So
what does that look like in terms of life change and a long-term future?
Well, so not many people are aware of what Parkinson's is, really. So probably better explain that your brain has two kind of commas in it, brain cells that produce dopamine, and dopamine's a neurotransmitter that, you know, controls your movement, smooths out your muscles and all that kind of stuff. And I've lost about 80% of them. They're dead. And so that's a progressive neurological disease. It's degenerative. And long term, they say it's kind of 10 years to serious disability. Then at the moment, I'm on medication that kind of, you know, helps me through, gives me about 8 good hours a day at best. But yeah, and then diabetes, the insulin helps, so I can still have the odd occasional pink fondant fancy, which is great.
Now, you're both, part of your job description is comedians. So can you give me, just before, because some of the stuff is going to be really heavy that we're going to talk about, but Carl, can I have my two favourite Carl Beech stories, which is, one of them, it was your capacity as Christian Vision for Men, you're now doing Edge Ministries, but tell us that story about how you, I guess it was the start of the gathering, and then tell us the titch story and the woman that was in a bad way. Go on.
Yeah, well, the gathering is, you know, I've been describing it for about 13 years now as a cross between Top Gear and Songs of Praise, and it for blokes, which Steve is very, very involved in. Is part of the furniture with me. Essentially, mate, I was incredibly bored of conferences, particularly ones that I was organising myself, and I was actually boring myself at my own events. And I was on a cruise from Liverpool to Dublin, which CVM, Christian Vision for Men, had organised. My predecessor had organised. It was actually a ferry, to be fair, but we called it a cruise. And the idea was we'd take a whole bunch of blokes over to to Dublin, go to the Guinness factory, talk about Jesus, and then cruise back. And we didn't sell enough tickets, and the whole thing nearly blew up the ministry. We nearly went insolvent, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I was sitting around a table on the way back on this ferry, in a very flat Diet Coke, and moaning with my team. I'm not much given to moaning, but I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is terrible. And someone said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to create a conference, a festival that my mates would actually want to come to. Now, I'm a first generation Christian, grew up in Essex. I'm thinking none of my mates would come to this stuff. And they said, well, what does that look like? I went, well, comedians, bands, blow stuff up, shoot stuff, people, whatever, I don't know, and just camp out and eat barbecue food. And they said, well, what do you need to do that? And I said, well, a field. And they said, where are you going to get a field from? And it literally, I'm not joking, it was about 2 minutes later, this guy wandered over who instantly looked very different to me. I mean, he was an older guy, slim, with like a pullover tied around his neck, which is just not what you do when you grow up in Romford. So I instantly knew that he was quite a sophisticated chap. And he sort of said, hello, are you Carl Beech? And what I tend to do, Simon, when I'm confronted with extremely well-to-do people, I can't help mimicking them. I don't know what happened. I just can't help it. So I just said, oh, yes, I am. He said, can I show you what's in my tube? And I went, yes, you can. And so he undid this tube, this cardboard tube, and he went, I've just bought some polo fields. And he had these, and I went, oh, great. And he rolled out these polo fields, and he said, well, my son drove in through the gates of these polo fields, and he had a vision of thousands of men coming to Christ, and I wondered if you'd like to use them. And I went, yes, I would. So that was the start of the gathering. That's the field near Swindon. Oh. And that was that. And as I said, Steve's very much a part of that. And since that day, about 2 years later, we managed to put it together. We had a festival the first year for about 300 blokes. I'd never organised anything like that before. I didn't have a big team. We didn't have enough toilets. We had the world's grumpiest barman from Swindon. Didn't have enough showers. The whole thing was nearly a disaster. About 20 men gave their lives to Christ. So we thought, well, let's do that again. Then over the years, it kind of escalated, and we had about, 1,500 guys make first-time professions of faith at that event now. And we just come back from it now. And Steve was there with me. It was a good laugh, wasn't it, mate? Wasn't it, Steve?
Oh, man. Highlight of my year.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's funny because, I was cycling up the hill when I was training for my cycle ride, listening to your podcast, and I was wetting myself and nearly fell off fell off my bike, just laughing and out of breath. It was, brilliant. And then the other one was years back. You said you're an Essex boy, and was it in Basildon?
Near Basildon, Bas Vegas. Yeah. So I was planting a church on a super rough estate, which has been a bit of a forte, and it's kind of what I'm involved in now. But after 18 months, kind of nothing had really happened. I'd led some pub musicians to Christ, but apart from that, nothing had really gone on. And these pub musicians, new Christians, encouraged me to go on a prayer walk with them around the estate. They were quite interesting, actually, because we organised a community barbecue with them, and I hadn't really discipled them that much. And the first song they did was I Want Your Sex, Baby, all over the estate with big speakers. So that was good fun. Followed by Hotel California. But anyway, so we went up and down these roads, door knocking, which is not really my kind of thing. But I'll never forget knocking on number 5 Colville Mews. And this woman answered the door who looked like Big Daddy the wrestler. She was huge and super aggressive. And she went like, what? And I said, well, my name's Beechy. I'm not an undercover vicar, and I just started a church on the estate, and I'm coming around to introduce myself. And in quite colourful language, she said something along the lines of, I don't want a man who wears a dress for a living telling me how to live my life, with a few F-bombs chucked in, and slammed the door. I was a bit shaken. I was much younger. And I walked up the path, and the pub musicians were kind of laughing at me. And as we were walking down the road, I thought, I got this nudge in my heart that the Holy Spirit whispered to me, knock on the door again, knock on the door again, knock on the door again. And I couldn't resist it. So long story short, I went and knocked on the door again, and she was fuming and told me to do one. I sort of scarpered off. It was about 10, 12 days later, I'm walking back down that road, and I felt this overwhelming nudge again, knock on the door, knock on the door, knock on the door. So I took a deep breath, grabbed my guts, knocked on number 5 again, and she opened the door and she went, "Oh, it's you, love, come in." And I went into his house, which was completely bare, uncarpeted, bit of a state. She asked me if I wanted a brew. And I said, I'll never forget this, because her daughter, who wouldn't be much older than 6 or 7, was on the floor rolling a spliff for her mum. And I'll never forget that. And because I sat in a chair and she said, "How'd you like your tea?" And I went, "Strong, please, with a couple of sugars." And she went, "Sugar's very bad for you, you know." I'm like, what the heck? But then she told me this story. I said, "Why'd I change her heart?" And she told me that day she had planned to kill herself because she had undergone a terrible sexual assault by a member of her family years previously, and she was suicidal. And she had litres of drink and a huge amount of pills in her bedroom. She was going to kill herself. And I knocked on the door and broke the moment. And as I walked away, she said a prayer. Apparently she said that she'd remember praying in school assemblies. And she said, "God, if you're real, you'll make that man knock on my door again." And you did.
Wow.
And although I was angry, it broke the moment. So I'm still here. Tell me what's going on. And we led her to Christ.
Beautiful.
And she became a lollipop lady on the estate, and which was actually instrumental in church growth, because it turned out she had been an illegal debt collector and everyone was terrified of her. So she'd sort of go, "Do you go to Queen's Park Church? Because you should." And people would sort of turn up, so terrified. So yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of breakthrough. Of course, the next thing that happened was a few days after her conversion, this bloke came to my front door. I had the front door open. There was this big, hulking menace of a guy. I sort of said, "Hello, mate." He was carrying a can of Foster's Extra or Tennant Soup or something like that, like strong beer in the morning. I said, "Hello, mate. What's your name?" And he said, "Titch." I was like, okay. So he invited him in, and I said, "What do you do, Titch?" And he said, "I mash people." That was his words. "I mash people. And I come to have a word with you because you've been messing with my sister's head." So I did the great British solution, which is, "I'll put the kettle on, mate, and we'll have a chat." Turned around, put the kettle on, heard a kerfuffle behind me, big commotion. And he had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position. And me and my wife had to sort of lead him out almost on all fours into our little living room, sat him down, gave him a strong cup of tea with some sugar in. And when he got his head back together, we said, "What's going on?" And he said, "When you turn your back on me, I pulled my fist back to punch you in the neck as hard as possible, in the back of the neck. He could have killed me." He said, "But all this power came out of your back and put me on the floor." He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, mate. I think it's just called the right result." And he came under the power of the Holy Spirit and gave his life to Jesus. And that was the start of the real breakthrough on that estate. And within 18 months, had a household of Christians on every single road.
Wow.
So that was the early days of ministry for me, really. So yeah, and here we are today. Yeah.
So love those stories. Listen, guys, I'm going to put both Carl and Steve's podcasts from last year, 18 months, whatever it was ago, in the chat, so you can revisit that. All the more poignant in light of what's going on in their current battles with Parkinson's and cancer. So we've had Carl's situation. How about Steve? Can you fill us in on what's the latest?
Yeah, I would say that I was on that cruise as well with Carl. I remember sitting down and having that chat about the gathering. And I've got to say, it wasn't, when you say cruise, it's more of a battleship. Wasn't it? A decommissioned battleship. It really was. Yeah. It'd never been in a boat like it.
Anyway, we did oversell it, I think. We missold it, to be fair.
Yeah. I thought it was going around the Bahamas, not Belfast. Or Dublin, wherever it went.
Been overselling it ever since, yeah. Anyway, Steve, more seriously, you're in a tough spot, aren't you?
Well, it's not ideal, shall we say. September 21, my wife, who is a very wise woman and very observant, she noticed a tiny little mark on the underside of my foot when my big feet were sticking out the end of the bed. And she said, "What's that?" And I just thought it was a little blood blister or something, because I walk the dog a lot. And she nagged, and eventually I listened to her. And then I realised I could take a photo, and I sent it to our local quack, who called me in and had a little look at it. And she said, "I'm going to refer you to a dermatologist." And I thought, well, that's weird. I haven't got any spots. I've got beautiful skin. So I went to see this guy, and he wasn't sure. And he persuaded me to have a biopsy. And basically 2 weeks later, I'll never forget it. I was watching The Chase, having a mug of coffee, 5:15 on a Thursday, and he phoned up and said, "We've got the results of your biopsy. You've got cancer, skin cancer." And it knocked me for six. It really did. And I didn't really ask many questions. And my wife had been working, came in and asked me lots of questions. And I had no idea really. But the story evolved, and it turned out I had a very unusual type of cancer. It's called acral lentiginous melanoma, which sort of 99% of people who get it have very dark skin. So here's me, this white guy with this really unusual type of cancer. And I've been on this journey for nearly 2 years now of various operations. They've cut it out. They've taken more. They've removed lymph nodes in my groin because the cancer had spread there. And it's kind of spread more and more. In January of this year, I had a really big op. And I've got a scar. It looks like I've had a fight with a shark. It's the best scar you've ever seen. It's about 14 inches. And this professor from the Marsden, he only does this op twice a year, took all the lymph nodes out on my right-hand side in my groin and pelvis area. So he took 19 out, and they found cancer in 9. And we really hoped and believed and prayed that was all sorted. I obviously have scans on a very regular basis now. My immunotherapy drugs, which I'd been taking prior to that to kill the cancer, hadn't worked, so we stopped that. But one of the side effects was it killed my pancreas. So I've ended up as a type 1 diabetic as well. So I have to take insulin, an extra insulin if I have a yellow fondant fancy. I prefer the yellow to the pink, Carl, I've got to say. So anyway, the last scans weren't great. My oncologist called me in, and my wife, Bekah, and we went in there and she had tears in her eyes. And I thought, you don't have to be an expert in body language to realise she hasn't got good news. And essentially she explained that the cancer had spread even more. And it was in my stomach and spine, liver, and also my brain. And I probably had 5 months to live if nothing worked. So that was, we just got back from Spring Harvest. We had a wonderful time there. It was a Monday lunchtime when we got the news. We had to go to Gatwick to pick up 2 of my daughters who'd been out in Australia, and we picked them up from the airport, and they were buzzing and excited, full of stories, which we let them explain. And then that night we had to break the news to them, which I couldn't because I was too upset. I think I probably cried for 3 days. I was so dehydrated. I lost 4 pounds. Would you believe it? And we had to break the news to the girls. And then I was just very aware, Simon, as well, that I was gigging that weekend because I travel the country doing magic and comedy to communicate the gospel. And I was aware I had 4 comedy nights on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And I thought, there's no way I can do this. And I chatted to a few friends, Carl included, who all recommended I try to do it. So I pulled myself together, went and did the gigs, made people laugh, told them about Jesus, and came back so energized. And it was really good for me. So it's been an interesting time. It really has. Yeah. I mean, I saw you. I was at Spring Harvest, and we chatted. As I said, I told you I'd had the scans. I was waiting for the news on the Monday. Yeah.
Funny enough, I mean, I walked in. You're pretty much the first people I knew that I saw. And I was doing a live interview 7 minutes from when I said goodbye to you, and I went to the toilet and got locked in the toilet. And the last number on my phone was your wife Bekah's, so I rang her, and then there was this frantic, they say maintenance, and I was running across site to get there a bit late for my live interview. So that's the last time.
Horrendous, but they make a great story, and they're often tax deductible as well.
So that's the last time we saw each other, and it was just before the bombshell. So essentially, spelling it out, you were given at the time, was it 5 months to live? And that's 3 months ago, is it?
In April, yeah.
So we're recording this in July, and according to your prognosis, you're graduating to glory in September. Is that right?
Probably about the 15th. Yeah, put it in your diary.
But you're not settling for that, are you? What does it look like?
Absolutely not. No, I believe God can heal me. I love the quote from Spurgeon, the great preacher. We're all immortal until our work is done. Yeah. And I don't think my work is done on this earth. And I'm still feeling fit and well. And I have tests and scans. I went to the hospital yesterday for a 4th dose of this different type of immunotherapy, which I couldn't have because I've got a few symptoms breaking out in my body. So we're putting that back a fortnight. But But generally, I feel fit and well. I mean, over these last few months since we've been sharing the news, it's been amazing. Some people have come out of the woodwork who I haven't known since I was at secondary school, believe it or not, over 40 years ago. And some of who I thought were good friends, haven't been in touch at all. So it's been really fascinating how people process the news.
Yeah. And I mean, even from a sort of a theological faith perspective, I find it really fascinating because one of our most listened to podcasts is a guy called Jeremy Marshall. I don't know if you know him, but his story is amazing. I think there's an acceptance of it in his case that he would die. I had another mate she has died now, but Chrissy Chapman, and she was dying. She was absolutely dying. She was in a wheelchair, allowed to go home for the weekend. She was bald, and during the weekend, she was totally healed, including having a full head of hair, literally came back overnight. And when she went back in to the doctor, her doctor, when he turned around and saw her, not in the wheelchair, wheeling in the wheelchair by hand and with the full head of hair, he came over, touched her head of hair and fell to his knees, speaking in tongues, and is now a missionary doctor on the mission field. And I think 11 of her carers in hospital on the back of that extraordinary miracle, which I'm really paraphrasing and saying in brief. 11 people gave their lives to the Lord. So we know God heals. Some people, there's an acceptance, and I think that's what you're saying, Carl, with yours. You're an acceptance that about with your Parkinson's, that God's going to work in and through that rather than praying for healing. Have I got that right, Carl?
Yeah, so uncannily and weirdly, I actually had a kind of prophetic warning of what was going to happen. I'd been to a gig in Liverpool, Blokes Night, and it was like a beer and curry night. I'm teetotal, so the only other teetotal bloke in the whole thing sat next to me. He was about 6'7", monster of a bloke, and just sort of spoke to me without me sharing anything before the talk, and then did my talk, and he sat down and carried on talking at me, really. And then just as I went to leave, he went, "Listen to a song called Chainbreaker by Zach Williams. You've got to listen to it on the way home. Listen to it. Write it in your phone." So I did, and listened to Pink Floyd all the way home because I felt indignant. And then about 2 weeks later, was on my way to pray for a mate with motor neurone disease, actually. So I put that song on. And it's a remarkable worship song. And the presence of the Lord flooded my truck. And I felt God say to me really clearly, "My grace is sufficient for you. What's coming to you is going to be a gift." And I instantly had this feeling I was going to be really ill and burst into tears, which is very unusual for me. And I phoned my wife, and she sort of said, "Are you having a breakdown?" I went, "No, I think God's speaking to me. I think I'm going to be really ill." And so I had this kind of warning. So when I went through the diagnosis process, which took ages, and I had all these developing symptoms, I knew all the way through that my prayer would be that God would give me joy and strength to witness to Christ in the midst of a decline. Now, I'm not saying that God won't heal me and can't heal me, but what I'm saying is where I'm at the moment is that I'm to demonstrate joy when you pass through the fires and the floodwaters. And that's where I'm at with it. And I'm slowly, very slowly declining. But that's my current situation, which is a hard one sometimes for the church to hear. I mean, we prayed for Steve's healing at the gathering. I prayed for Steve to be healed, but I'm actually praying for myself. Give me strength and joy as I slowly, go downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can you share sort of lessons that the Lord's teaching you in it, and also unhelpful things that people say to you, so that we're better at coming alongside our brothers and sisters when they are suffering?
Yeah, well, there's so much we can say about this. I know Steve has some really developed thoughts on this already. I mean, you already said, you'd not heard from some people. And that was certainly true for me and still ongoing, in that some people just don't know what to say. And so I just think they don't contact you. Or when they do, they try and talk about everything but the fact you've got this terrible condition. So I just put it out there. I'm completely unashamed. I mean, it does have some strange physical presentations, Parkinson's, and you can get some quite dramatic side effects in the drugs, which are very visible. But I'm just unashamed about that, to try and, help people get off the hook. But I have found that the church isn't so good at, and many people are, but many people are not so good at understanding that I'm not asking for prayer for healing, to the point where I have had one or two people actually shout at me. So, like, one bloke trapped me in the toilets after speaking at a conference. I was trying to do a wee. And he had one hand on the urinal saying, "You're wrong, you're wrong. You should be praying for healing, you're wrong." And I'm like, "Bro, I'm trying to do a wee. Can you back off? Like, you're nuts." So that got a bit confrontational. And I had another guy, an American evangelist, posted publicly on Facebook that I was walking in disobedience and cursing myself. So I just blocked him, to be honest. So I thought that was a bit mad. So I have had to process a lot of that stuff, which is really intriguing. And to be honest with you, you just don't need it. You got enough to battle with. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, in terms of lessons, I am learning that God's grace is sufficient, and you can have an extraordinary peace, even though you're staring down the barrel of some quite serious stuff. And that's certainly what I feel at the moment. I have got God's peace, although honestly, I do have dark moments, and you do think about the future. I haven't got any fear, but I'd say the overarching narrative of my life at the moment is joy and peace. The overarching narrative, but that doesn't mean to say you're not going to have bleak days.
Sure.
And the condition gives you bleak days. I mean, I produce very little dopamine now, so I don't ever get any reward buzz for anything. You know, if you find a parking space on a busy day, you're like, yes, you know, because you get a dopamine hit. I get none of that, very, very little. So you can have to wrestle with apathy, and young onset comes with almost constant pain and stiffness and soreness. And so you are having to lean into God significantly, actually.
Yeah. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, as I said, we've had people who've not contacted at all. And then we have other people who kind of tell you too much. I was at the gathering a couple of weeks ago with Carl and 1,400 guys. A little Welsh bloke comes up to me. I've only been there 10 minutes. He said, "Keep fighting, brother." I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "My brother had cancer, died 2 days ago." I don't want to hear these things. I had 3 cows.
I've had that. I've had people come over to me and say, "Yeah, my mum had that. She was a terrible state at the end. Then she died." I'm like,
You don't want to hear it.
I hope you're going to be okay. My brother had Parkinson's. He was trashed. I'm like, "Oh, cheers."
I know. I had 3 mates take me out for a curry to cheer me up. We had 3 stories of their friends who died of cancer. And I said, "Boys, this really isn't helping." I had a guy from church come round to our house, and he's a builder, a gardener type guy, and he was giving me a quote for some work in our back garden. And he said, "What's the prognosis?" So I closed the door so the kids weren't there, and I explained it to him. And he said, "My brother had that." And there was this pause, but I didn't want to ask what happened to his brother. So 5 seconds of silence, and this guy, Andy, said, "He didn't make it." And I thought, this is not helpful.
Yeah.
Please say something like, you know, "We love you, we're praying for you, no need to respond." As I came out from hospital from one of my bigger treatments, and 176 texts from people saying, "How did it go? How are you feeling?" And you know, I put a thumbs up for one person who was slightly annoyed that I'd only put a thumbs up. But then when I explained how many people were writing to me, and you just want to forget about it, Carl, as well, don't you, sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cancer. You don't want to talk about Parkinson's. You want to completely forget about it.
Yeah. I had one guy, actually, before he knew where I was at, I'd had a diagnosis. He was saying, "Oh, you know, whether it's MS or Parkinson's, Carl, I had a friend with Parkinson's, and I watched him slowly diminish over 8 to 10 years. And my gosh, what it's done to him, it's completely wrecked his life. And I pray you haven't got that because it's such a terrible thing." And I went, "Actually, I've just been diagnosed with that."
Yes. And thank you for sowing the seeds.
Yes. Yeah. But on the positive side, as you said, Steve, I mean, I think, was it Deborah Green setting up that Justgiving, that GoFundMe or whatever, and unbelievable love, hasn't there?
Do you know what? That is what has made me cry more than anything else. The kindness of people. It's been absolutely amazing. And as I said, to reconnect with people I went to school with, it's just been wonderful. And also some of my other friends, my friend Steve, is a magician, absolute atheist. He's always called me God Squad and teased me. And he burst into tears when I told him. And he's in our WhatsApp prayer group, and he prays for me every day. Oh. And he wrote to me saying, at least something good has come out of this. I'm praying every day.
Yeah. Oh,
you think moments like that. Because as I keep saying to Carl, good has got to come out of bad. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a wasted experience.
And loads so much has already come out.
Has come out of this.
Yeah.
You know, as I've shared my story, my friend Wendy had a little mark on her ankle. And her daughters nagged her because they were aware of my story. She went and got it checked out, and it was exactly the same cancer, but it was so early, it was cut out, and she's absolutely fine. Yeah. So you think, wow, this has maybe saved a life, at least one life.
Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't at the gathering with you boys, but I hear that you shared, and it was an incredibly powerful time, wasn't it?
Thank you. Yeah, I felt so. It was very emotional seeing all these big boys in floods of tears.
Yeah. And do you know what? I mean, even this podcast will be one of those things because, you know, when I heard from you about the sort of grimness of the prognosis, I was like, okay, well, if that was me and we three have got a very similar DNA and heartbeat, basically we just want to use every opportunity. Our lives have been consecrated with different skill sets or overlapping skill sets to letting people know about the glorious joy to be found in a relationship with Jesus. And I was like, well, you know, I so don't want to be seen as opportunistic in this, but I'm like, you know, if I was dying, I would want, I'd want people to come to faith at my funeral. I'd want to, you know, to be a voice from, you know, I've graduated to glory. I'm fine, but I'd want as many people to. It's just another excuse, isn't it? And so I wrote to you, and I wrote to your wife as well, Bekah, who we've also done a podcast with. So I'll put that in the chat as well. But said, look, would you be all right with us doing this? And the deal being, if our many thousands of us praying for healing, if God's answer is not that in the here and now, if the ultimate healing is just that you're going to have a new body in glory with Jesus forever, if that's the way the Lord's going to do it, then we will, we'll play this, you know, the following week after you've graduated to glory, and that's weird. That's a weird concept, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, my experience from a very different context, living in a war zone, is that basically I particularly in the early years, you know, I'd always preach when I came back to England saying, you know, I'm 26, I'm 27, I'm 28, and I don't think I'm going to make it to the age of 30. I think I'm going to die. And, you know, I had close shaves and people tried to kill me. And you know, that was an absolute gift, living with the expectation of dying, because it meant that I was not going to waste today. I wasn't going to sit binge watching some vapid, random sort of soul-deadening box set, you know, worshipping the altar of Netflix, because today, this is the day. I want to maximize it, and I want all my relationships to be in order, and I don't want to be holding on to any grudges, and I want to tell everyone that I love them, and I want everyone to know, you know, what life is about and the hope that I have, and I want them to have that opportunity to know that hope. So those years and the privilege of living in a war zone with the total expectation, genuine expectation. I mean, I thought, in a sense, the Lord has said, you are going to die, you are not going to last, but you're going to be more on the sort of Jim Elliot end of the spectrum of, you know, dying young, and that being used as a positive stir for other people. That was a gift. And Steve, we're still praying for healing, but you're living in that tension, aren't you, of the gift that means that you are maximizing every day. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had a very strange week where we had the 3 H's, hospital visits, believing for healing, but having to go to the blinking local hospice as well to talk about end-of-life care. And I thought, oh, wow, this is a crazy week I didn't see coming. But yeah, I've been reprioritizing and really focusing on gratitude as well. And life is precious. And I'm so thankful for every day I wake up. You know, when I get up in the middle of the night for a wee at 4 a.m., I thank God that I'm alive. And gratitude is a real key to happiness for me.
Absolutely.
And I really count my blessings each morning and thank God for them. And it's sort of funny, really, when it would be easy to focus on all that is wrong, it's becoming easier and easier to spot what is right. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm sitting here today and it's a beautiful sunny day. And my friend Pete is coming for lunch. And I've got some pals coming over later. And we're off to Devon on Saturday. And I'm just so grateful.
Yeah. I mean, gratitude, again, that's what, from my experiences, that's the biggest gift. Living in the extremes was the gift of gratitude. Everything is a gift. Nothing is a right. So our health is not right. The freedom that we have in our nations to express ourselves, even if that's diminishing. The fact that we got access to food, to healthcare, to education, to clean water. I mean, when I'm tempted to self-pity or despair, I go through the grace gifts of God, and I often preach on Romans 12. Therefore, in view of God's mercy, get on the altar, surrender. In view of God's mercy, the Greek word there is plural, it's mercies. And so when I'm tempted to self-pity or despair, or thinking, poor me and my lot in life, I just go through all the mercies of God in my life. There's so much to be grateful for. And we live in an entitlement culture, isn't it? And that's why we're amongst the most grumpy of nations on the planet, because when you don't get what you want, it's an affront to my divine right to happiness or contentment or fulfillment or whatever. And I think, as you just said, that gratitude is a key piece to the puzzle. And yeah, we're meant to. And again, my experience, and Philippians 1:21, isn't it? For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. That's gain. How we're meant to see our lives. Yeah, and then just different scriptures coming to mind, isn't it? Like 1 Corinthians 15, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? When we know the end game, it's just a whole different paradigm, and a very powerful one to witness to other people. As you said, it just provides real freedom in the midst of the grimness.
If I can just add, when you talk about grimness, I think, and I was going to ask Carl the same, I think I've probably laughed more in these last few months. Yeah. And I've spent time with people who bring me joy. Yeah. I've discovered 3 types of people in life: people who drain you, people who are like a radiator, who keep you warm and cozy, and waterfalls as well. And I've been choosing to spend more time with radiators and waterfalls. And I've watched more comedies on TV and less news and current affairs. And it's been joyous, and hanging out with people I really want to hang out with, and laughing and joking and telling stories. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Carl?
Yeah, I concur with that, really. I mean, you can have these moments you think, can I really be bothered to walk the dog? Now I'm thinking, well, I can walk. Yeah. I can walk at the moment, so I'm enjoying it. Yeah, and so you suddenly become grateful for smaller things that might have passed you by before. Bird song, sunrises, family around you, and totally like Steve said, I am a little bit more selective in who I spend time with, and why. I just want to surround myself what Steve said there is brilliant, the radiators and waterfalls. I mean, I do spend time with people who make me happy. They might sound a bit selfish, but you just start to be quite careful about how you're using your time, much more discerning, because you are staring down the barrel of your mortality and your physical capability. When the doctor sat me down and he basically said, this is what you got. You've got young onset Parkinson's. He said, it's going to be grim, and it's going to be brutal, and it's going to be really tough. You come out from a meeting like that and think, how am I using my life? Who am I spending my time with? How am I going to squeeze as much juice out of this now as possible? Yeah. Because every day is now precious, isn't it?
Yeah. Now you're both turbo. Well, we're all 3, I think, turbocharged activists. We've got relentless schedules. I love it. The fact that even after your diagnosis, you career off for another, gigs at the weekend and pour yourself out. What's it look like with succession planning or Sorted magazine? The stuff you're involved in that you invested years in. Can you talk into that?
I'd hate Sorted to die when I go. I've been chatting to Carl and see the CVM about them keeping that going. I'd love to keep that going. It's our 100th edition next May, June.
Just tell us what it is again for those that don't know.
Yeah, Sorted is a men's lifestyle magazine I started nearly 16 years ago. I wanted something good and wholesome for fellas that's an evangelistic tool as well. So it goes all over the world. We send them free into 77, 78 prisons, which is remarkable. We give copies away to the armed forces. We have them available in W.H. Smith's, and it's a really cool evangelistic tool that isn't heavy and preachy and kumbaya and Lord of the Dance and all this sort of stuff. And it's written in a seeker-sensitive manner for the man in the street. And it's just one of the things I'm most proud of. I've been on the road 35 years doing evangelism, and people hire me to do comedy and magic at events, but I also made a kids' cartoon that's gone all over the world, a Christmas cartoon called It's a Boy, That's an amazing story. Written books and travelled, and it's an absolute blast. Obviously, the travelling won't carry on because what I do is pretty unique. But certainly the books and some of the projects, I'd love to see those carry on. It'd be such a shame if they died with me.
So, guys, as you're listening, if you don't get Sorted, sign up for Sorted. It is a superb magazine. Give us your favourite Sorted story, because I mean, those books, magazines, the amazing thing is that they just get into unbelievable places we couldn't possibly fathom, don't they? So give us your favourite one there.
Oh, can I give you two?
Yeah.
Used to send 80 copies into Belmarsh Prison in London, which is a Category A prison. And the chaplain wrote to me saying, could you send another box of 40 as scuffles are breaking out on the wing when the magazine arrives?
Brilliant.
They're finding out a Christian magazine. So that's one great story. Another one, I say to the fellas, listen, evangelism can be scary, even for us professionals, but giving someone a magazine, putting it through someone's door, leaving it somewhere in a coffee shop or a barber's or wherever can have a huge impact. And someone left a copy on a plane. Well, a few copies on a plane, and with subsequently 2 pilots have written to me who've come to Christ because they picked one up that someone had left on a plane that they'd been reading, that they'd picked up at the airport and become Christians. So there we are, 2 stories for you there.
Love that.
Brilliant.
And Steve, beyond Sorted, what would be, as you look back, what's given you the greatest satisfaction?
I just love sharing this good news. Like Carl, I was a first generation Christian. My family thought I was crackers. My dad clipped me around the ear and swore at me when I came to Christ after being at a Boys Brigade camp and reading a little booklet called Journey into Life. He thought this was absolutely crazy, nuts sort of stuff. Just travelling around and speaking to people, be it performing at the Royal Albert Hall, chatting to 20 little old senior citizens in an old people's home. That's been wonderful as well. Going to Mexico City, I think we talked about this when we did the podcast, ended up speaking at an occult festival, the Day of the Dead, preaching the gospel, getting out of a straitjacket, talking about freedom from sin, and seeing 200 people come to Christ at an occult festival and being invited back the following year and being on the posters. I just thought, this is hilarious. This is just wonderful.
So beautiful, isn't it? So I'm just interested what that balance looks like of spending loads of time with your precious girls, but also looking forward. How do you plan your diary? Is it literally by oncology appointment, and you plan holidays ahead? What's it like?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, all the oncology and all the tests are Monday to Thursday generally, and I'm normally gigging Fridays and Saturdays, so it's worked pretty well, really. It's just crazy. So I was in yesterday, and my oncologist is wonderful, but she's so nice. She spends so much time with people. You're always hanging around for 2 hours, so that puts me in such a bad frame of mind. And physically, my blood sugars go high as well. So some of the tests that they do, it's a little bit skewed because I'm stressed because I'm so flipping annoyed at being waiting there for 2 hours and just looking into space because there's such boring place at dull and depressing places. So many of these hospitals.
Yeah. Both of you, you've got fantastic women in your lives who are journeying with you. Carl, do you want to share a bit on that?
Yeah, so I actually met Karen when I was 18, when I stumbled into a Brethren church in Hornchurch in Essex. I actually asked her out the first time I met her. I said, let's go to the Deep Pan Pizza Factory because I'll be really good for you. She said, I only go out with Christians. I said, well, I am one because I was British. I thought I was a Christian. Yeah. I did try and fake a conversion shortly afterwards. That didn't work either. But eventually I came to Christ. We got married, and that was 30 years ago next April. And as Steve would say about Bekah, she's my rock, really. We're a great team. We've got 2 adult daughters, one called Emily, who's a tattoo artist, and one called Annie, who's a veterinary surgeon. So go figure that one out. Yeah. How do you bring them both up the same? One lives in Narnia and the other one's an academic. I don't know. But it's great. Family's tight. It's good. Yeah.
And so you're all surrounded by women because Steve, it's all ladies as well, isn't it, Steve? How about you and Bekah?
Yeah, Bekah and 5 daughters, and even my dog is female.
Well, my dog's a bloke but acts like a girl. My cat's a bloke but acts like he's a bit camp. So
there we go.
Yeah.
What does your cat do that is effeminate?
Well, the way it kind of struts around, really, Steve. Just sort of walks in a very camp fashion, I think.
Okay, we're going slightly off piece here. Reining you guys in. So I want to give I suppose, Steve, the last word. But Carl, anything that we haven't covered that you'd want to speak into? I'll just give you the floor on that one.
I'm not sure really. Only to say, I think one of the things I'm learning about this stuff is that the church needs to get a better theology of healing and suffering, I think. Yeah, to have a great theology of healing, you've got to have a robust one of suffering. And, if you come out of a tradition in the church where it's all guns blazing for healing, that is great. But we need to understand that sometimes God calls us to journey through some very tough waters. And I think we need to get better about that. I think we need to get better understanding that. I think we need to get a better understanding our mortality. And, my eyes have been open to just how tough it is if you're disabled out there. I mean, I'm now disabled. I've got a restricted driving license. It brings all kinds of snags. I know Steve's facing that. And so you just look at life through a different lens. And I think there needs to be some kind of awakening in those sorts of areas. But other than that, let's just get up and go. I'm feeling pretty good.
Brilliant. Well, listen, mate, I always love using this as a chance to promote ministry. So just if people want to be in touch with you, want to get behind what you're currently doing, just do a bit on that.
So I'm obviously president of Christian Vision for Men, very comfortable with the title El Presidente, for those who don't know. And I'm chief executive and founder of something called Edge Ministries, which is establishing ministry in some of the toughest and hardest to reach communities in the UK, kind of bottom 1% areas of deprivation. So you can check us out on Facebook or go to edgeministries.net or cvm.org.uk. And those charities are actually merging, and we just created Christian Vision for Women as well, and be launching an Academy for Women later this year. Cool. So all exciting stuff. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so, Steve, it's just a bit surreal, isn't it? Thinking that, you might be talking to us now and not be around in a couple of months. And therefore, when people are listening to it, it would be a voice from glory, in a sense. Take it away. What would you want to say?
Do you know what? I've had a wonderful life, and whatever happens, I've won. If I survive this, I've won. If I go to be with Jesus, I've won. It's a no-brainer, really. And I'm just cracking on and making the most of it. And a few people said, has God spoken to you in all this? And I think he has. And I think he's saying three things to me. And with this, I finish, really, because it always kind of chokes me up a little bit, really. He's saying, I love you. I'm with you. Try not to be scared.
I love you. I'm with you. Try not to be scared. Yeah. Makes me think of it was a FB mayor. I don't know much about, but he's a great man of faith, and he was sort of physically decrepit, and he wrote a note before he died, which was delivered to a friend, and the friend received the note, scribbled note after FB had graduated to glory, and he just scribbled, "I've raced you to heaven. I'm just off. See you there. Love, yeah. FB." That's a sort of threesome as well, isn't it? That's beautiful. Yeah. Oh, Steve, sending lots of hugs and good vibes down the line right now. And Carl, you're a total brick, man. And I love being part of a body that includes such cool brothers as yourselves and such cool wives alongside you in the battle. And let's pray. Father, we pray for the legs. And Lord, you are over all, and we trust in you. And we just say, Maranatha, come Lord Jesus, whatever that means. I think few words because this mystery, but thank you that you love us, that you're with us, and that we don't need to fear. And we bless the legs into the next generations and generations after that, Lord God. Be with them and bless Carl and family too. And Lord, may this podcast inspire us to be all in for however long we've got. Living in your grace sufficient for us, your power made perfect in weakness. That's what the word says. So have your way in our lives for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, brothers. God bless you loads. Seriously,
thank you, guys.
Precious holy moment. And folks, I'm just gonna, just say, look, I think lots of people would benefit from listening to this. So pass it on to anyone you think that it would help, and I think that's a lot of people. And we'll put stuff in the blurb, whatever's relevant about supporting Legg family, the crew, and you being in touch with Carl and his work as well. So, boys, over and out from me. God bless you.
Cheers, guys.
God bless. Cheers, pals.
Thanks. All right, it's been different this week. Next week we'll be back to, I suppose, a more normal structure with another friend, fantastic buddy, doing some cracking kingdom work. But in the meantime, have a good week. God bless you loads, and toodaloo.
So listen, folks, I'm just gutted re-listening to that. Very powerful, very moving. Steve has left behind his gorgeous wife, Bekah, and their 5 girls between them. And Steve, they trusted God, they lived by faith. He just worked hard and didn't sort of store up loads of treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, when thieves break in and steal, in terms of big biblical speak. He was just all in, trusting the Lord to provide his Jehovah Jireh. And we know he will. But I said to Steve, I would love to do something in anticipation of this day coming. And so mutual precious friend Deborah Green has set up a Justgiving page. So if you wanted to help the family with their ongoing life expenses, it's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/bless the legs. Bless the legs, one word. We'll put that in the blurb. And let's be praying for Bekah and her girls and cheering on the legs. And again, thanks, Carl, for a great interview. And Steve Legg, brother, we salute you.